Okay, so welcome to everyone who's catching up on the recording. We're all taking a moment at the start of this workshop before we dive in to just bring our goals to mind. Okay, so everybody has some goals that they've already either established or begun to think about for 2025. And we're going to talk today about a process that we can follow to make sure that we're not getting in our own way as we go about working to accomplish these goals. Okay. And as the title suggests, this is going to be about digging into what's actually really important to us. Okay. Meaning is going to be a big part of how we create some true momentum towards these goals and help ourselves to avoid the common traps or the common obstacles that come up for all of us and create problems or make us feel like the goal isn't possible to achieve. Okay, so everybody got your goals? Give me a thumbs up if you've got them written down, ready to go. Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so the reason there's so many obstacles, okay, to achieving goals is because of the way that our mind works. So I like to use the metaphor of an iceberg to understand the two parts of our mind. There is a conscious part and a subconscious part. The conscious part is sort of like the bit of the iceberg that's above the surface. Okay. It's quite a bit smaller. And below the surface, there's all this stuff that we can't see. It's under the water, but there's actually a lot there. There's more going on below the surface than there is above the surface. And this is very true of the way that our mind works, okay? There's a little bit of our mind that's conscious, and that's where our thinking occurs. So these are the thoughts and the actions that we choose, the thoughts that we're aware of throughout the day. All of that is in our conscious mind. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff in our subconscious mind. So things like the beliefs that we hold about ourselves. Okay. The habitual patterns of behavior that we've maybe learned and developed over the years. Our values, the things that are truly important to us and that are driving our sense of motivation and driving our choices. Typically, all of that is below the surface. And all of these things can create obstacles to us attaining the goals that our conscious mind decides on. Okay, so we consciously identify our goals, but we don't work with the stuff below the surface, like our beliefs, our values, our emotions, and our learned patterns of behavior that can actually work against that goal or prevent us from making the changes that we actually want to make. Okay. So this is just a situation for everybody. And so in order to be more successful, we have to understand a little bit more what's going on below the surface of our own minds, okay, in order to support ourselves. And if we can sort of shine a light below the water, become a little bit more aware of those parts of ourselves, then we can get them working with us. Okay. And we can use them to actually achieve our goal instead of them becoming an obstacle. Right. So, with all of that in mind, we're going to start by resolving the most common obstacle to success with goals. Okay. And this is something that is actually relatively simple to resolve. We just have to be aware of it. And it's that we don't go into our goals with enough detail. We allow our goals to be too vague. Okay. So a vague goal is a really vague goal would be something like, I want to lose weight. Okay, it's a good starting point, but it's far too vague because there are so many different ways that we could go about doing that, right? And so when we set the goal, I want to lose weight, we haven't created enough detail for ourselves in order to fully understand and clarify what it is we're actually committing to. Okay. So we're all going to take a moment now to dig into some serious detail around our goals. Okay. But before we do that, we're going to engage in a little exercise that encourages us to think about what essentially what our life would look like if things were really, really great. Okay. So does everybody have the workbook? Sorry, I should have checked at the beginning. Does everybody have the workbook? No, Catherine's shaking her head. Okay, no worries. I'm gonna quickly share that in the chat in case you want to use it. It's not a must do, but you can just follow. I'm going to be prompting everybody on the questions anyway, so no panic. But I will pop it in the chat here for anybody who does want to download it. Probably be also useful if you want to come back to any of the exercises or questions or processes that we talk about in this workshop. This will give you a nice way of doing that. Okay, that is loading into the chat for everybody. So if you like, you can open that up and you'll notice that the first question has the title, My Extraordinary Life. Okay. So here's what I'd like everybody to do. We're just going to take a couple of minutes and I want you all to imagine your life 5 to 10 years from now. Okay, 5 to 10 years in the future. And I want you to imagine that you are living a life that feels extraordinary to you. And over the next 2 to 3 minutes, I want you in bullet form to jot down as much detail as you can about what that looks like. Everybody okay with that? All right, let's go for it. I'll keep an eye on the time. You guys go ahead. One more minute, so keep adding detail. What does this extraordinary life, 5 to 10 years in the future, look like to you? Let's pause there with whatever you have. So this is a question that's designed to help us think beyond the limitations of what feels possible right now and connect in with what we'd actually really love to have present in our lives. Okay. So I'd be willing to bet that nobody wrote down, oh, I'd love to have 5 yachts and 6 homes in the Caribbean. Probably what all of you have is actually something that represents you and in many ways your values or what is truly important to you. Okay. And so there's a lot of useful information in what just came out of your thoughts in response to that question. And it's a question that you can spend more time reflecting on. And in fact, I would encourage you to, if that felt like an interesting and useful exercise. Okay. Um, but for now, based on what you initially gathered, okay, I want you to have a look back at the goals that you have established for yourself this year. And I want you to think about, how do these two things connect? Is there a clear connection between the goals that I'm working on this year and the vision of what a really extraordinary life would look like for me in the future? In other words, are the goals that I've set for myself right here in the here and now, do they move me towards that vision? And if so, how? What is the connection? Okay. So you may see some strong connections right away. You might be like, oh, yeah, absolutely. This is related to this. Okay. If you do, great. Kind of notice those connections and take note of them, because those help you tap into the deeper meaning behind the goals that you have in front of you for this year. If the connections aren't as obvious, that's okay. It might take a little bit more time of sitting and looking for the connections for them to come through. Or it could also mean that it might be useful to rephrase or revisit the goals that you have for yourself this year, and find a way to create a stronger connection between what you're focusing on right now and what a really extraordinary life would look like in the future. Again, we do this because it helps us to tap into the deeper layer of meaning behind what we're putting our energy and effort towards right now. Okay. And that helps to create an initial layer of clarity around the goal. Okay. And it starts to make it feel a little bit less vague. So less just kind of connected to, I'm not sure, just sort of connected to something random, and more connected into what's important to me and the life that I want to create for myself. Any questions about that? Did we like that exercise? Yeah, seeing a few nods. Okay, so if it felt interesting, like I said, I encourage you to come back to that question. Okay, so now that we have kind of checked in with the connection between what we're working on now and that bigger picture, what I'd like to do is dig in to the goals we have in front of us for this year and make them more specific. Okay, so we need to add some detail here. So detail like, what exactly is it that I'm committing to do? So again, if the starting point is I want to lose weight, what does that actually mean? What does that actually entail? What is the movement part of that? What is the nutrition part of that? Um, where am I going to be working on this? Like, where does this fit into my life in a practical sense? That's another important detail. In terms of time, when am I going to be able to do these things? And then lastly, who else is involved and how might I need to involve them? So it could be family. It could be Catherine herself, right? She's involved in this process for everybody. So how is she involved for you? How is your family involved? So we're going to pause again for a moment. And I'm going to really challenge everyone to try to add as much detail to these goals as you can. Okay. And no detail is too obvious. Sometimes we don't add detail because we're like, oh, yeah, whatever, that's obvious. I already know that. But it's still important to clarify those details for yourself and get it all out in front of you so that you have all the details together and you're creating a clear picture of what it is that you are setting out to do and what that entails. But while you're doing that, I'll just explain again, why is this important? Okay. When the goal is too vague, we're not able to create a clear picture of what it is that we're setting out to accomplish. And that limits our ability to do the right planning. Okay. It also limits our ability to anticipate potential obstacles. So we'll come back to this question of obstacles a little later in the workshop, but we need this layer of detail and clarity first before we can start to anticipate obstacles and make plans for how we're going to deal with those obstacles. Okay. So once again, this is just a starting point. And so I want to encourage everyone to keep adding detail. Okay. Keep getting to know your goals at a deeper layer. We want such a high level of detail that you could, talk someone else through it and set someone else up for success to do exactly what you want to do. Okay. So based on the level of detail that you've just created for yourself there, I want you to do a quick check-in with yourself and ask the question on a scale of 1 to 10, right now, how possible does accomplishing this goal feel? 1 equals I have zero belief in my ability to do this. Okay. 10 equals I'm absolutely sure that I can and will accomplish this. So be honest with yourself and see if you can figure out which number is the best reflection of where you feel you're at with this at the moment. Okay. So this scale represents sort of a scale or representation of our confidence or our belief in our ability to actually make this goal happen. And for most of us, it's pretty rare that we feel like we can put down a 10, isn't it? Like we'd like to be able to put down a 10. But for most of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, it's hard to put down the 10. Okay. There's usually some facet of self-doubt or worry or concern that stops it from being a 10. Okay. So if you have put down a 10, fantastic. Okay. If it isn't a 10, if it's less than a 10, I have a follow-up question for you. Okay. And I've actually got a little tool called Mentimeter, which is going to give us the opportunity to anonymously share the answer to this question. Okay, so this is kind of fun. Um, so just to reiterate, this is an anonymous tool. So any answer you respond to this question with, nobody will be able, there's no name associated with it. Okay. Nobody will know who had put in the answer. So if you'd like to participate in this, I'm going to add the link to the chat right now. Okay, so you can just click the link, or you can, using your phone, go to the website at the top here, menti.com, and use the code that's at the top, 76435020 to join. Okay. And once you've joined, you'll see this question come up, which is a mirror of the question that we had on the slide, okay? And this is the question I want you to ask yourself if it's not a 10, okay? What is the story that's telling me I can't? Because if we're not at a 10, then there's something telling us, there's a story that's creating doubt. There's some reason, right, behind that doubt. So what is the story I'm telling myself that's holding me back from putting that 10 down? So I encourage everyone to jump into this. Again, it's totally anonymous. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So just pause here for a moment to let everyone get their answers in. So thank you, everyone, for sharing these. So it's really powerful, isn't it, to see the stories that other people are carrying. And I bet most of us can relate to most of the things that have come up on this slide, okay? So we can see that doubt is a theme. It's hard to believe in ourselves. We're not sure that we can stick to it. We're worried about losing motivation and focus. It's too much commitment. It's like maybe we're locking ourselves into something that we don't want to do or can't do. Waiting on motivation. I failed before, so I'm scared of failing again. I'm not fit enough. I'm not strong enough. I don't have the experience. I don't have the opportunity. I don't have the willpower. Time, family can feel like a confounding factor, struggling to stick to things, worried about judgment. Okay. Yeah. So these are stories, okay, that often sit in the bottom part of the iceberg. They're hanging out in our subconscious mind. Okay. And the interesting thing about these stories is that even though consciously we can commit to a goal, the subconscious story that we have can be so powerful that it can actually prevent us from taking action towards that goal. And it can become a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or it can just keep limiting us in some way. Okay. So often these stories are referred to in performance psychology as limiting beliefs. They're things we believe about ourselves that are typically not true, or they're not absolutely true. We're not as bound by them as maybe we think or we feel. And because of the belief we have, that belief it can or is holding us back in some way. Okay. So the first step towards preventing these stories from continuing to be an obstacle for us in our life, okay, is to just recognize them. Once we pull them up out of the subconscious and we become aware of them, we can start to work with them. And more importantly, we can start to challenge them, look for why they aren't true, or look for other perspectives that are more empowering, that are more reflective of the truth of who we are and what we're capable of. And then ultimately to rewrite them. Okay. So thank you again, everyone. I'm just going to scroll down again so that we get to catch the last few that came in here. And I want everyone to reflect for a moment on what it feels like to see a group of people share these stories. Okay, what does it feel like to see that other people carry these types of stories as well? Sometimes we think we're the only one. So this is a neat moment to recognize that we're not, that actually most of us have a similar experience. Okay. And it's easy to look at other people and say, well, that's not true about you. Of course it isn't. Much harder to look at yourself and say, well, that's not true about me either. Or it doesn't have to be true about me. Okay. So these limiting stories, they're not evil, they're not bad. They usually form through very valid life experiences, and sometimes we need them at a certain point in our life to cope or to get by or to survive something difficult. Okay? But we have to be willing to let them go when they're no longer serving us. We have to get curious about how we can rewrite these stories in a way that empowers us, that recognizes the potential that we have and what we're actually capable of. Okay. So now you have your story in your conscious mind, okay? And what I'd like you to invite you to do with that over the coming days and weeks, okay, is start playing around with challenging that story. What if it's not true? What if it's not true anymore? What do I want to be true now? What is the story that I want to shape my reality this year? Because the truth is, you get to choose. Okay, you get to choose the story that will shape your year. And so, what I'd like all of you to work towards is eventually rewriting a different story. Okay, and I want the story to be a sentence or two that tells you why you can do it and how you're going to do it. Limiting beliefs are not facts. They can feel real, but they often are not real in a factual sense. Okay. All right. So part of what can help us to rewrite these stories is to start to build a stronger sense of our own personal or core values. Okay. This will further our own understanding of what is truly important to us. And this is very important for motivation and consistency. Okay. So what I'd like everybody to do now, okay, is write down a list of the 5 things that feel most important to you in life. Okay. The things that inform what you believe is important around how you live your life, how you show up, how you treat others, and how other people treat you. So there's some examples of values on the slide here, but don't worry too much about, is this a value or is this not a value? Just think about that question. What's important to me? What are the most important things to me that shape and guide how I live my life? If you can think of more than 5, perfect, no problem. But we'll go for at least 5. Okay. So we'll just take a moment for everybody to think about that and write those down. Take another 30 seconds or so, see what else comes to mind. So everyone's values are unique. Okay. What that means is that we get to decide what those values mean to us. So let's say Catherine and I both have adventure on our value list. Okay. What adventure means to Catherine and how that shapes her life and her decisions could look totally different to what adventure means to me and how that shapes my life and my decisions. Okay. So, whatever words you choose, you get to decide what that word represents. Okay. And how that informs the way that you live your life. So, of the list that you have in front of you, okay, I want you to think about for this year, for 2025, which of these values feel like they're most important? If I was to reorder them in order of importance, which ones would rise to the top? Another way of thinking about this is which of these values do I really want to be driving my choices and my behaviors this year? When we're talking about values, this is where the real impact comes in, okay? Is when we start to think about how naming something as a value naming it as something that is of utmost importance to us, okay? Um, how does that actually influence our decisions and our actions? So let's say somebody has health as one of their top values, okay? We want to then take that and think, well, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to value health in our life? If I really valued health, how would that show up in my priorities, my actions, my choices? If I value connection, same thing. What does that mean? If I truly value that, how does that influence me? Because our values are always influencing us. So, of the ones that rise to the top of the list for you, I want you to think about just clarifying for yourself. What do those really mean for me? And it gets to be, you get to decide what it means because it's your value. What does it mean to name that as something that is of utmost importance to me? It's a core part of who I am. How does that influence my decisions and my actions? Okay. So once again, as I'm sure you're already realizing, this is a big question. It's one that you could spend a lot of time thinking about. Okay. And I'll be sending you all home with a copy of a values exercise that can guide you to go to do more thinking about this if that feels useful. Okay. But even the thinking that you've done already so far is really useful. You have become more aware now of some of the things that are really drivers in your life. Now, values can be lived values, which means we're already living and acting and making decisions regularly in a way that really aligns with that value. Okay, so that's a lived value. They can also be aspirational. So an aspirational value is something that we believe is really important and we want to shape our lives more, but we can see that actually we're not in as much as we're not as aligned with that value as we could be in the choices that we're currently making. Okay. So if some of those values on that list for you are aspirational, that's okay. What that does is create the opportunity to think about what kind of changes would help take this aspirational value and make it more of a lived value. Or in other words, how do I align my choices and my actions to fit or match or be in alignment with that value? Now, we're going to take all of this thinking that we're doing and we're going to connect it back to our goals. If we can connect our goals with our values, okay, and understand for ourselves how striving for those goals actually helps us to be in more alignment with our values or the things that are of utmost importance to us, that allows us to create a deeper layer of meaning and clarity around the goal itself. And what that does is it creates commitment, which is much stronger than motivation. Okay. Motivation is pretty flimsy. It comes, it goes. Even the most determined, hardworking people in the world have incredibly variable motivation. Okay. I work with a lot of high performance athletes out there, people who we would all look at and go, wow, they must be so motivated all the time. Insider scoop, they're not. They struggle with motivation as much as the rest of us. Okay. What they typically have is a deeper level of commitment because they know with a high level of clarity how what they're doing day to day, what they're working towards day to day is connected in to the things that are most important to them in life. So I want to invite all of you to kind of start forming those connections for yourself. Okay. How do the goals you have mapped out for yourself for this year connect to your values? one of my top values is adventure, as it happens. And I made the connection a while ago that being physically fit and active is essential to be able to adventure in my life. Okay. Um, I cannot go travel. I can't hike up to the top of mountains, which I love to do. I can't go camping. I can't go skiing. I can't do all of those things that feel adventurous to me, exploring new countries, if I'm not fit and healthy. So that is a connection for me that helps keep me consistent with my exercise. Because believe you me, there's many a day I have no desire to go to the gym. But if I can remind myself that it's those actions that help me live the life that I want to live and honor that value of adventure, that gets me there. Okay. So you're looking for that type of a connection. And if it's not immediately obvious, just sit with it. Spend a little bit of time reflecting on it, and that connection will come. Okay. So we've pulled some of the stuff out of the bottom part of all of our icebergs. We've dug into the subconscious mind a little bit, okay? We have become a little bit more aware of the picture or idea of what an extraordinary life looks like to us, which is just a reflection of what's important to us, okay? We've become a little bit aware of the limiting story that is likely in some way creating an obstacle or creating resistance, okay? We've talked a little bit about how to start to reshape or rewrite that story. We've also become more aware of our values, which are a huge source of commitment, which is far more useful to us than motivation. And it allows us to kind of override motivation. If we have a strong sense of commitment that is clearly connected to our values, that allows us to stay consistent. So we just need a few more ingredients now to really take this forward into the year. And one of those ingredients is to create a mindset that prepares us to deal with challenge and discomfort. Okay. So you can see on the right side of the slide here that our thoughts directly influence our feelings. Our feelings then influence our behavior, and the behavior then tends to reinforce the initial thoughts. So what we think about the experience of being challenged and being uncomfortable will directly influence how we feel in the moment and how capable we are of withstanding that or sitting in that uncomfortable place. We have an instinctual resistance to discomfort. Okay. And so we often need to create a mindset for ourselves that prepares us to think about it a certain way and therefore manage that discomfort more effectively. Okay. So I'm going to make some suggestions here based off of performance psychology about a mindset that can really, really help. So I want to answer the question, what is challenge going to mean to me in 2025? Okay. So some suggestions. Challenge is going to mean that I'm learning. When I feel challenged, it's going to mean that I'm actually exactly where I need to be, that I'm pushing myself forward, I'm getting out of my comfort zone, and I'm moving towards my goals. Similarly, what is discomfort going to mean to me in 2025? And this is discomfort associated with growth, just to clarify that, right? So the discomfort that comes along with pushing ourselves. Sometimes that's physical discomfort, right? It's pushing for that extra kilometer on the run. It's going for another squat when Catherine tells you to when you really don't feel like it's in your legs. Okay, so it can be physical discomfort. It can also be psychological discomfort, struggling with that story, that doubt, right? Feeling like we're not good enough and trying to push through that and find a place of being able to tell ourselves, no, no, I am good enough. Okay. So whatever that discomfort is associated with growth, we want that to remind ourselves that discomfort, again, is a sign that we are growing. Growth and change is uncomfortable. We have to create a mindset for ourselves that reminds us of that. Otherwise, our default mode is always going to be to retreat from discomfort and protect ourselves from it. But that usually stops us from growing because we need to move through the discomfort in order to grow and change. Okay. So discomfort, what is that going to mean to you? Again, it can mean that I'm learning, it can mean that I'm growing, it can mean that I'm getting stronger. That's usually what it means physically, right? It can mean I'm getting stronger. It means I'm pushing myself. It means I'm being brave. Okay, you get to decide. And then lastly, what we often need in these moments, really, to push through the discomfort and keep growing, is a clear reminder of what's really important. And this is again where we want to connect in with our values. Okay. So for me, I didn't mention, but I also love riding and competing horses. Okay. And that's a big part of the adventure value in my life. And when I'm really struggling to push myself and handle that discomfort in the gym, I remind myself of why I'm doing this. And it's to be able to ride horses skillfully and with strength and to do all the other things that I mentioned, right? So that's my important reminder, or my what's important reminder. Okay. This is why I'm doing this. I'm doing it because these things are important to me. And acting and behaving in this way right now, pushing through the discomfort, is what gets me to the place where I can do those things or be that person. So have a think about what your reminder might be for yourself in the coming months. It's helpful if it's short and sweet, not too complicated, something that you can easily remember so that you can bring it to mind in those moments when you're feeling challenged or feeling uncomfortable in order to dig deep and push through. Okay. The next piece of the puzzle here is around planning and time management, which doesn't sound all that sexy or exciting, but it's actually pretty darn important to the process. Okay. Another really simple, common way that we fail to accomplish our goals is just because we haven't planned in a way that supports us or sets ourselves up for success. So here's the number one issue, and this is especially common amongst us as women, okay, is that we just don't plan for ourselves at all. We plan for other people. We plan to make sure everyone in our lives gets to where they need to be to fulfill their goals and do what's important to them. And we get the scraps of time left over if we're lucky, and more often than not, we don't get any time at all. Okay. And so, in terms of priorities, what we're doing is we're planning for work and other important must-dos and other people first, and then maybe ourselves last if there's any time at all. What I'd like to suggest is a different approach to planning that can help with this. Okay. It is where, when we set out to plan our weeks, we challenge ourselves to think about ourselves first. Now, this may feel uncomfortable. This may feel almost borderline selfish, okay, to do this. But it's actually not about making ourselves more important than everybody else. It's just about bringing ourselves up to an equal level of importance. Okay. So what this might look like is when we're planning our week, we first go, what do I need to do to help myself meet my goals this week? Okay. What do I need? What time do I need? So is it the gym? Is it a run? Is it like what's involved? Okay. And we plan for that first, however you'd like to plan, whether it's putting into a calendar or putting it on a to-do list, whatever your system is. But we think about ourselves first. Then we think about the other people in our lives, children, parents, friends. What do they need from us? Are we supporting them? And we build that in around what we need. And then lastly, we consider work and other must-dos like appointments and whatnot. Okay. And we build that in around the stuff that's already there. So this is a simple strategy, and usually the biggest obstacle to doing it this way is some sort of story that we're carrying around not wanting to be selfish. I'm supposed to put other people first. And so if this feels uncomfortable to you, there may be value in just sitting with that story and asking yourself, why is it true that I can't bring myself up to an equal level of priority to the other people in my life? If it feels like I can't, why does it feel like I can't? Getting curious about that. And supporting yourself to move towards a new story which says it's actually okay to make myself equally important as the other people in my life. And doing so makes a huge difference in our ability to accomplish the goals that we set out for ourselves. We have to allow ourselves to prioritize them. Okay. So, last few pieces. Finally, we need to think about the obstacles or the hurdles that might come up for us. Every goal striving process has obstacles and hurdles. Okay. So, I want everybody right now to think about what's the most likely obstacle that's going to get in your way as you set out to do all of this. You may know right away because it might be an obstacle you've been dealing with already. But what is it? Try to name it for yourself and write it down. The reason I'm asking you to do this is that we tend to try to avoid thinking about obstacles, okay? And we do that to our detriment because if we avoid thinking about them, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to plan for how we're going to handle them. So what we want to do is see obstacles as a normal part of any goal striving process. Our goal is not to somehow magically make it so that there's no obstacles, because that's impossible. Instead, our goal is to have a good plan in place for what we're going to do when that obstacle arises. So once you've named your obstacle, once you've named your obstacle, why don't you just think about how would I deal with this? How would I deal with this so that it doesn't become something that derails me and stops me? How do I make this just a bump in the road or a non-event? As we practice doing this, anytime you identify an obstacle, okay, that feels like something that's really getting in the way or creating a problem with you accomplishing your goals, I want you to take this approach. Identify it, name it, and then think about, okay, what am I going to do about it? What can I do about it? What's in my power? What can I control? Use your innate creativity, problem-solving skills, ask for support from others, find a way to manage that obstacle. Because when we do that in advance and we have that plan in place, we find that these obstacles, they don't have the same power. They don't derail us because we've already anticipated it and we have a sense of how we want to respond. Okay, so let's do a quick summary of what we have covered today. Okay, so goals are challenging because of all the obstacles that can exist in our subconscious mind that can prevent us from doing what we need to do or following through in our commitment. Okay. So what we've done is first and foremost clarified the goal. We've added more detail so that we can form a clearer picture of what it is we're committing to. We've created a little bit more meaning around this goal, hopefully, by connecting it into the future of what a really extraordinary life looks like to you and how this goal is helping you move in that direction. And also by connecting it into your values, becoming more aware of your values and the things that are most important to you. We've also identified one common obstacle, which is the limiting story or the belief that is causing us to feel like it's not possible. And we've gotten you started on the process of getting curious about that belief, challenging it, and hopefully working towards rewriting it into something that's more empowering. And we've also taken a moment to identify some other potential obstacles that could come up and create a little bit of a plan. And lastly, we've given you a strategy that helps with the time management side of things, the planning, which is also a really common hurdle that encourages you to think about your needs first in your planning and build the rest in around that. So all of these are just steps in a process that you can repeat over and over again and come back to over and over again. And in doing so, the research shows that all of these actions really genuinely move us towards greater success with our goal striving. all of these are a little just sort of an introduction as well. So as I said, anything that felt interesting today, I would encourage you to come back and spend a little bit more time on it. I'm going to share that values exercise that I mentioned in the chat right now too. So anyone who wants to spend a little bit more time thinking about their values, can do so. And now I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to see if there's any questions, any burning questions or anything we're wondering about from anything that we talked about today. While you're thinking about questions, I might also prompt you to put like a top, yes, totally put the questions in the chat. And also if you're willing to share like a top takeaway, maybe letting us know what, if anything, resonated with you or felt most interesting from the content that we covered. I'm also going to put my email in the chat, and I genuinely, please, anyone with questions, please feel free to email them to me if they come to you after, or if you're just sort of not comfortable asking them in an open group environment. For some reason, the keyboard I'm using is a new one, and I can't figure out how to do the @ symbol. So I'm just going to leave a space. So that is Annika at AnnikaMcGivern.com. Because for the life of me, I don't know where the @ symbol is on this keyboard. So true about the discomfort, but I hadn't thought about it that way. Yeah, awesome. That's great to hear. It's a new perspective on discomfort, and it's a huge part of it, right? Because we have to be willing to be uncomfortable a lot of the time. We got to have a mindset that prepares us for that. Breaking down the goals is really helpful. Fantastic. Yeah, the more we can do that, like the more detail we can add, the greater success we're going to have because we're creating a much clearer picture in our mind of what we're committing to, and that already helps us commit more to the process. Great way to reframe negative thoughts. That's great. Enjoyed challenging myself to think deeper. Yeah, yeah, great. Linking the values and how they motivate us to keep commitment. Yeah, it's a really powerful tool. The more that you can clarify your values, think about your values, and keep drawing those connections, right, between the goals and what's important to you, the stronger your sense of commitment will grow. Digging into really thinking about them and what they actually mean. Yeah. Okay. Fabulous. Well done, everybody. It sounds like everybody really dug in and did the work, followed my suggestions, did the thinking, which is awesome. I think that's fantastic. I'll just repeat myself again. Please do reach out with any further questions or queries. Email me really anytime. More than happy to follow up and clarify anything. It's not too late to be add a yacht to your vision. But you like the values. Yeah. Awesome. And that's the funny thing, right? Often when we think, oh, well, if someone's imagining extraordinary life, we think, oh, we're going to be unrealistic. But the reality is when we ask ourselves that question, we just actually end up getting to the heart of what's really important to us. It usually isn't yachts, as it turns out. Everyone, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you for spending this time with us, sacrificing part of your evening. Catherine, thank you so much for having me. And I hope to, yeah, cross paths with you all in some way in the future. And I wish you all the very best of luck with your goals. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Bye. You still sound like a dinosaur, Catherine. So weird. Yeah.